A young black male fatally shot a teen, sleeping, fatally shot. Who will be responsible for it? Well, not the cop. Let's go to the video. Here it is.
At least 4 D.C. police officers approached the car early Saturday morning, March 18th. A young man appeared to be sleeping inside. Police say the car was stolen and they called for backup, with 2 U.S. Park police officers responding.
He takes golf, just let him go. But don't get inside that car.
Ignoring that advice, those 2 officers opened the rear doors and one got in. The driver, 17-year-old Dalaneo Martin, drove off, one officer falling to the ground, the other still in the back seat.
Stop, bro, shoot!
Martin's family says that he was shot in the back 5 times. He slumped over the wheel, the car crashing into a house. Police say a gun was found in the vehicle. Dalaneo Martin leaves behind an infant son. His mother, Tara Martin, shared her grief.
He's my child. He's my son. And until you be where I'm at today, you would never understand.
Put up the screenshot, full mass. He was 17 years of age. He was a child. He was immature. I have been there. Many of you can say the same. He does not get to face a jury. He does not get an opportunity at probation. He will not have his constitutional rights respected. He is dead because the police decided to ignore not only stated written protocol, but command at the scene. U.S. Park police officer will not face any charges for fatally shooting a 17-year-old child in the back when he was sleeping in his car last year, when he was startled by officers entering the vehicle before one of them unloaded 6 shots into his back. Following a review of the March 18th, 2023 shooting death of Dalaneo Martin in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia announced there was insufficient evidence to pursue charges against the U.S. Park police officer involved. There's more. On the night of the shooting, officers responded to a report of a suspicious vehicle. Upon arrival, they discovered Martin was asleep in the driver's seat of the car they suspected was stolen earlier that month. The engine was running and the ignition had been damaged, according to authorities. From there, a Park police officer quietly entered the back seat while others attempted to subdue Martin in the front. After a brief struggle, Martin drove off with the officer still in the back. The officer pulled his gun, then yelled for Martin to stop before firing several shots. They killed the driver and sent the vehicle careening into a house. Martin was later pronounced dead at the scene, and autopsy later found he'd been shot a total of 6 times. During a news conference earlier this year, Martin's mother, Tara Martin, called for murder charges to be filed against the officers involved, who have never been publicly identified. Quote, "I don't eat, I don't sleep, and justice needs to be served," she said. According to USA Today, this decision is deeply troubling and sends a disturbing message to our community that it is okay for officers to use deadly force against children in the community. Martin family's attorney, Andrew Clark, said in a statement, quote, "Dalaneo never posed a threat to the officer's safety or to others in the vicinity. Yet, seconds later, he paid the ultimate price in an encounter that never should have ended in the use of lethal force." Additional Metropolitan Police officers, along with 2 U.S. Park police officers, arrived at the scene to help detain Martin. Body camera footage captured the group discussing how to safely remove Martin from the vehicle. According to the footage, the officers surrounded the car, both sides entered the vehicle in an attempt to restrain Martin. During the struggle, one officer did in fact fall to the ground on the driver's side as Martin accelerated, with a Park police officer still in the back seat. Quote, "Stop, man, just let me out. Let me go." The officer yells while Martin keeps driving. "Stop, stop, or I'll shoot." Seconds later, the officer shot Martin in the back several times while the car veered off the road. Bullets struck Martin in his upper back near his neck. The police performed CPR on Martin, but he never regained consciousness. Last year, the Park Police Union defended the actions of the officer who opened fire. Union Chairman Kenneth Spencer said that the shooting of Martin was justified. Shortly after the shooting, the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia launched a civil rights investigation, April 2023. November 7th, the office issued a statement concluding there was insufficient evidence to pursue federal criminal, civil rights, or criminal charges in the District of Columbia. Quote, "After a careful and thorough and independent review of the evidence, federal prosecutors have found insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the United States Park officer is criminally liable for Mr. Martin's death. The U.S. Attorney's Office remains committed to investigating allegations of excessive force by law enforcement officers and will continue to devote the resources necessary to ensure that all allegations of serious civil rights violations are investigated fully and completely." Let's discuss context. The prosecution is arguing we don't have sufficient evidence to prove these crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, they contextualize these words in a very specific way to never say they believe what the cop did was justified. They never said that. They said we don't have the sufficient evidence for these crimes in which we're investigating because the standard for the federal government is statutorily different under the civil rights allegation when there's a criminal element to the crime. Let's zoom out for a second. He's 17 years old. The officer decided to ignore command and ignore protocol. Why? Because he was scared. He was likely scared. In a situation like that, if you're afraid, number one, you definitely don't violate protocol by jumping in the car. That's the entire reason you're not supposed to get in there. It's because of safety protocol, liability reasons, etc. Number two, you don't know if this is a juvenile or not. You have not bothered to engage the individual directly. And number three, how many times have we been here before where a person who's homeless, sleeping inside of a vehicle, they all of a sudden get startled by someone trying to break a window rather than just attempting to talk with them? Remember, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. There was no reason for this kind of interaction to take place. And don't get caught up in the wordology of it, where you will hear the phrase justified or insufficient evidence and think somehow it means right. You know, there was a time in this country where if you sat on the wrong side of the bus, if you wanted to sit in the front, but they told you you had to sit in the back, that it was then thus justified for law enforcement to arrest you. It was justified for law enforcement to beat you. There was no penalty. So what measuring stick are we using when we talk about justification or sufficiency? Because if you're utilizing theirs, you have to understand that their measure has been off routinely. All right, Sharon, thoughts here?
I do believe context is everything, Doc. And did you know that even a male Black child, when sleeping, is apparently dangerous enough that they require deadly force? We can't even bother to question them. Right. Did you also know that in some jurisdictions that if you are in a vehicle and you crash into a home, you can be charged with breaking and entering, intended or not? Wow. I think this officer should be charged with that. I think this officer should be charged with murder, reckless driving, endangering the public, assault with a deadly weapon. This is certifiably crazy. And by the way, this is the dumbest cop. We'll get to the crimes, but this is the dumbest. He's a danger just to be out there with society. Yeah. and should be locked up for that reason alone.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, violate protocol, violate command, get in, seconds later, shoot the individual in the back, creating, as you have alluded to, a worse situation potentially for everybody else around them, crashing into a house. The kid didn't do that. The kid's dead. The cop did that. All right, we'll bring you updates if any update comes.